post George Floyd, businesses, they did the superficial black box in social media. And what pushed them to even do more, or to do, yeah, to make some more accommodation, for lack of a better term, was Black employees saying, but do really Black lives matter? Because you're treating me like crap, right? Like that's what, and it was this pushback of, it can't be superficial. And, you know, part of the challenge that was happening with this education around diversity, equity, and inclusion was a learning, right? We went through this moment of learning. So to some degree, I think that, you know, we needed some of that superficial education for some. But I think it kind of went off off the rails a bit in some places. Now where we are is we're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing the pushback to that. But you know what has taken place is the Department of Education's push to the universities and colleges and universities has been dropped, right? But the damage was done because many of them got rid of those programs already. Quite a few of them pivoted, but even without it being the law, they've already gotten rid of it, right? So it's like you bucked, right? Like you did it preemptively. Um, and we're starting to see a lot of these cases go to court and lose. And so what is taking place? Because I think I read something the other day of it's a First Amendment right around inclusion and diversity, and what an organization wants to do in that space. That is their right to be able to create the environment that they want to have. So now we're in this space of, how do we do this safely so that we don't become targeted to be sued, which again is part of this compliance mindset. How do we now shift to, how do we become intentional in creating an environment where everyone that is a part of this, that we have hired to be here, is being set up for success?
You know, you hit on something, and I could feel my energy drain a little bit, because you actually hit on probably one of the saddest parts of this for me personally, is that when you talk about kind of the effort that these organizations and companies put forward, and then, you know, they got that pushback and they started abandoning it. I think for those of us who have been doing this work for a long time, we saw this coming. We knew, history tells us that this is the tactic. You don't have to go very deep into things like Project 2025 and see that that's exactly the intention that was meant to be there. This retreat, you know, once the damage is already done, as you said. So I think that's what part of bums me out about this in a large extent, is because, you know, yes, to your point, we were flooded with a lot of energy of people who were really, I mean, they had all the intention in the world, but they lacked sort of that education and the intentionality and really the core of this work in order for it to be sustainable. And you know, in a lot of ways, we collectively fell right into that. So now we're sort of having to pull ourselves up. And so I think the way we address it, and the way that I'm seeing it happen now, is really a resurgence of those practitioners, those traditional practitioners who have been doing this work, that don't need it to be flashy, that are in, you know, they're doing the behind the scenes work to, like I said earlier, make this codified into the systems of the way business works. A quick story on some of the work that I've been you know, privileged to be a part of is, you know, in some organizations, we actually looked at baking in certain specific inclusion metrics into compensation packages to say, not only are we going to do this, but you will be held accountable for it. And you know what? It's going to hit your money. If you don't care about anything else and you care about your money, it's going to hit your money. And it wasn't about, you need to hire so many people or things like that. It was like, how are you moving the needle? Here's our organization's stated goals when it comes to inclusion. What are you doing? And you're going to be evaluated and held accountable for that. That doesn't have to be flashy, doesn't have to be a poster, doesn't have to be, something that you put on TV. But it's something that kind of builds into the DNA. When you're onboarding new employees, that is one of the first things you hear this is part of our core values. This is what we believe in inclusion. These are the type of behaviors that we will use to demonstrate inclusion. And this is what you'll be held accountable for, right? We're hitting it on day one. When you walk in there, those small, perhaps maybe insignificant sort of things is what's going to then compound upon itself to sort of drive and make that part of that culture. And again, this didn't happen overnight, so it's going to take time to get back there. But I really do think that it's these types of things, investing in employee resource groups to do more than just, have a cultural celebration or, have a potluck, but to really make them partners in the business, give them a seat at the table to say, how does this resonate? Especially if you're a customer facing sort of organization, realizing that your employees are also potentially your customers and saying, hey, we want to hear from you. How does this resonate with you? We want to bake that into, again, the DNA of how we produce products and things like that. When it comes to entertainment, it's like using that voice of the consumer to help drive the way you do things. And so those are the types of things that I'm really kind of excited about, because I am starting to see that come back, and I am starting to see organizations be a little bit more open in it. But I really do think it needs to come back to the people who have seen this, our ancestors in this work, who have been there, the thought leaders in this space. And we need to kind of go back to basics and say, what were they talking about? What were some of the methods and tactics and thought that they were putting into this work, and really kind of go back and not forget those lessons that we've learned, because again, they've been through this before. They've seen it come and they've seen it go and they've seen it come back. And so I think there's a lot to learn from history. I think there's a lot to learn how we sort of mold that and shape that into what we see now. And that's a lot of the work that I do. When I joined this work, we used to talk about, you probably heard this too, we used to talk about inclusion, like, having a seat at the table and being invited to the party.
Right.
Exactly. Right. And so, like, for me, like, I'm like, okay, what's the modern twist of that? Like, how do we sort of change that, keep that same concept, right? That there needs to be that voice, there needs to be that representation and all those types of things, but do it in a way that makes sense for today's business environment. And so I just think all of those types of things, plus a whole bunch of other stuff that we're not even talking about, is baked into that to start really being intentional about this work. But we got to recognize that it's gonna take work, and I think that's the key piece to this. It's gonna take you, me, and anybody else who's in this line of work and cares about this stuff to really roll up our sleeves and get a little dirty and get this work done.
Yes. No, I mean, and there were three things that you said just now that really, really stood out to me, right? It's actualizing inclusion, right? It's one thing to say we're inclusive. What does that look like? And that's the question that I ask my clients. What does that look like? If I was to walk in as a new employee, how will I know that I feel included, right? What are those behaviors that you spoke about? I think that is absolutely critical. The employee resource groups. Anyone that's talked to me about employee resource groups, I'm like, are they employee resource groups? Are they affinity groups? Are they employee resource groups? Because affinity groups are one thing. But if you're going to use this group as a resource, do that, right? That is free market research. Those are the folks that are in the communities that can help you shape. And I use the example from when I was at Amazon, right? They had Black women talking about, I can't find Black hair products on the website. And so they created a hub, and that was based off of Black employees having those conversations, right? The Black Employee Network coming together and a few folks doing that and creating that section so you could easily search for hair care products. The other thing is, and I think it is so critical, and I think it was a miss in 2020, was the history. Understanding that we have been here before. The very second guest I had on this podcast, so season 1, episode 2, was my cousin, who is, oh my gosh, she'll be 90 soon, but she had been doing DEI work for 40 years. And part, and she only retired from COVID because she was like, I don't feel like being on video. But but the episode was the history of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, how did we get here? Because it didn't start there. And she talks about civil rights and the affirmative action and what was supposed to happen and working during all of that time. And I'm like, there's so many lessons learned from those who have been here before and they've seen this happen. Don't dismiss that. You know, my producer and I have conversations all the time about generations and how older generations are easily dismissed. There are so many nuggets and jewels that we can get from those that have been doing this work where we're not recreating the wheel.
Yeah.
How do we, as you said, modernize what's been already done? And so I think that those are very, I don't want to say easy, but low-hanging fruit to some extent on how organizations can start to rethink and how reshape how they're looking at doing inclusion work, because it is going to take some modifications. It is going to take a reevaluation of how we reward and award our leaders within organizations in this space, hold them accountable. Absolutely. In this space. And it's going to take some humbling of, we don't know all the answers. And so who can we go to? How do we tap into those that do have and know the answers, or at least can help us get there, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are the things that I think are, I'm so glad that you brought those up because they're so critical, but they're not impossible. And I think that's the piece. A lot of this is too hard. Like you said, y'all run multi-million-dollar companies with your eyes closed and
everything's hard.
Acquisitions, that's hard, right?
Everything's hard. It's like, yeah.
Right. And it's not hard when you, again, have the right people in place. And I'll kind of wrap that up with, don't just put somebody that is from an underrepresented group in a position to manage these things, to check the box to say, oh, look, and then give no resources, no support, no anything, and you're setting them up for failure, right? Like that was something that was happening a lot. And so there are people out here that are doing this work, that have been doing this work, that have pivoted as they needed to pivot to continue to do this work as well. And so that's what I think organizations really, really need to focus on.
Yeah.
Rolando, we could talk for hours. Oh my gosh. If folks wanted to get in contact with you, find your Substack, like what, where, how, who, all the things.
Oh, I thank you for that. Yeah. So my Substack is under my name, Rolando Talbot, with 2 T's. There it's really a space for me to be a little bit experimental. We talked a little bit about my Art of War for Inclusion up there, but I do a lot of work in the neurodiversity space. So I try to look at inclusion from sort of multi-tiered layers, from both a racialized perspective, from a gendered perspective, and looking at it particularly in the workspace, in the corporate workspace in particular. So I've got a lot of things up there. I'm really interested in, in systems and in frameworks. So I've got a lot of just really my contemplations and my thoughts around how to, like you said before, and we talked about earlier, just to actualize inclusion. A lot of the work that I do, we'll talk to leaders and they'll say, we did this initiative or whatever, and our employee sentiment scores are they're in the toilet. They're not like this inclusion work didn't work, right? And it's like we've got to sit back with that and look and say, okay, what is it that you actually did? Let's interrogate, let's have those honest conversations. And so I've got frameworks up there that are really designed to kind of help not only facilitate those conversations, but I'm a data person, right? So it helps to actually put metrics to the things that we're talking about. So it kind of gets out of the feelings realm. It kind of gets out of the, we did all this, we spent all this money, and it actually looks to put metrics connected to what we do so we can actually measure that growth. I also I'm part of what just I think brings me peace and joy sometimes is writing. I enjoy writing. It's a way that I regulate myself and kind of keep myself centered in this work, which, as you know, can be very heavy at times. So I do a lot of work in things like speculative fiction, where I've got a couple of books that I put up there that are just my way of sort of answering questions that I've just always had about the world that I'm unable to answer. So rather than try to find the answer, I try to imagine what it would be like if I had the answer. So a lot of the fiction that I write really comes from that perspective of a what if there was a world where, my brain in the way that it worked was actually the norm as opposed to divergent, and what would that look like? And so I kind of explore those types of topics. And then I also write poetry. So I've got poetry on my Substack as well. And it's really poetry around my experience being Black and autistic in corporate America, and like, what is that like? And I'm really excited about it because the first book of poetry that I wrote, I call it corporatism, which is a bit of a play on words, and my autism. But it's called corporatism, being Black and autistic in corporate America. There's 2 volumes of poetry that I have online, but I'm really excited because the first book that I wrote is actually in pre-production to become a stage play. So we're actually going to take the poetry and put it on stage so you can actually see and feel and hopefully empathize what it's like being both Black and autistic in corporate America. So I'm super, super excited about that.
We're going to have you come back and talk about that. I mean, that is a whole other area that I would be very interested to hear your perspective and your thoughts, particularly as a bonus mom with two sons that are on the spectrum, and one with ADHD as well. And so understanding that and how me as a parent can kind of help prepare them for life after high school, right? So that's kind of our mindset right now. But
going through it too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So we'll have to have you come back and have that conversation, because I think that's the after 5 piece of this work, right? It's how this stuff shows up in our lives. And so I would love to have you come back very soon so we can have that conversation, because I think that there's so much that people can learn from you in that space.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, my Substack and my LinkedIn is where you can find me under the same name. And again, I just, I love having these conversations because it helps me grow. It helps me understand different perspectives and informs my work. I talk about all the type of encounters that I have and conversations that I had and what I learned and what I'm struggling with and what I'm challenged with. So that's really what I'm interested in. And I think that's part of the work, right? I talk to, when I talk to leaders, I'm like, hey, by no means am I going to come in and have all the answers, but we're going to figure it out together. We're going to learn together. We're going to grow together. And I think that piece of humility and vulnerability also helps leaders understand that there's not an expectation that they be perfect. And that we are going to stumble. I think it's important what we do after that. Once we learn and once we stumble, it's what do we do?
Now that we know what we know, how do we move forward? Rolando, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for having this conversation. We're going to get back on because we need to have this part 2 conversation as well. I just think that there's so much wealth and knowledge that you have to share with this audience. And so I truly appreciate you. And thank you for the flowers. I was a little verklempt, but I appreciate it as well, because this is why we do what we do, right? We want to make sure we're having these conversations and make sure that people know and understand that it is accessible, right? These are not hard conversations to have. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning in. Again, I hope that you were able to walk away with a few nuggets that you can kind of take into your organization, be it corporate, be it nonprofit, be it your church, whatever it is. This work will continue to move forward. And so, how are you going to reshape? How are you going to rethink? How are you going to look at inclusion where it is not an appendage, but it is a part of the organization in which you do? So thank you for joining. And until next time, have a good one. DEI After 5 is produced by the Leon Thomas Group. For more information, go to theleonthomasgroup.com.